Well, welcome everybody to Trent University's virtual winter open house. We are so excited to welcome you today to the Anthropology and Archaeology session. My name is Jillian and I'm an enrollment advisor here at Trent and am also a very proud Trent alumni, and I'll be moderating this session. And with me today, I have a beautiful panel here, as you can see. I have Dr. Helen Hayes, Associate Professor at the Trent Durham GTA campus. We have Amy Bridges, a fourth-year anthropology student, as well as Sinette McWhirter, a history and anthropology student who is also in her fourth year. And we are all so excited for the path that you have ahead of you and look forward to sharing with you all of the reasons why Trent has been ranked the #1 undergraduate university in Ontario for 11 consecutive years. During this session, you can ask your questions in the chat. And at the end of the session, we'll also have a short live Q&A period with the members of our panel who can share all their knowledge as well as their experience of the programs. And the right-hand side of the chat is where you can put your questions. This presentation is also offered with closed captioning. And to enable this, please select the 3 dots at the bottom right-hand side of your screen and select Show Subtitles. Our events today, there are many different sessions happening. There's also a live tour happening as well today and live chats that you can join. So if you do have any questions after this session or during this session, feel free to join those as well. But with that, I'll get started, and I'm going to give the floor and the virtual microphone to Dr. Hayes to talk about the anthropology and archaeology programs here at Trent.
Okay, well, welcome. So to start off, anthropology and archaeology probably are not exactly what you think they may be, and they may be a little bit of what you think they may be. A lot of people seem to think about anthropology as going off to some exotic location to study some other group of people. And a little bit of truth in that is that we do study other people, but the other truth is that we also study our own selves. Anthropology is actually a really broad discipline that encompasses both cultural anthropology, which is what most people tend to think of when they just think anthropology, but it also covers archaeology, which is in fact actually a subdiscipline of anthropology, as well as biological anthropology and linguistics. Now, cultural anthropology, as I just mentioned, studies living people. It studies everything about living people. It studies why we do things we do, what we are interested in, how we structure our families, how we structure our societies, how we relate to other particular groups. It also overlaps with biological anthropology in many ways, becoming really very crucial today in understanding why people respond to certain circumstances the way they do, such as vaccines, such as ideas about isolation or plagues or communications. And this is, again, where cultural anthropology overlaps, as I said, with biological anthropology. And it also grades into what we would call medical anthropology, where people are actually studying medical effects on different cultures, as well as different cultures' responses to different types of medical practices. It also grades into other disciplines, such as policing, where we get into cultural issues about how do people respond to various circumstances, as well as forensic anthropology. So one of the big questions that I always get from students is, well, how do I know if I want to go into archaeology or forensics? And the joke that I always tell my students is, if you can't do with fresh and wet, then don't go into forensics. But if you're okay with old and dried, then maybe you're interested in anthropology, because that's actually where biological anthropology grades into archaeology. Archaeology is, in fact, actually sort of cultural anthropology for the dead, as I always tell my students. We're interested in all the same questions about ancient cultures. How were they structured? Who did they trade with? What sort of things interested them? What sort of religious practices did they have? The only difference is we don't have living people to talk to, so we ask questions differently. We do scientific methods to study diet. We have some leading researchers at Trent University who specialize in a type of archaeological science called stable isotope analysis. You know the old phrase, your parents always tell you, you are what you eat? Well, it's actually very true, and it gets encoded into your bones. And using stable isotope analysis, our researchers, Dr. Jocelyn Williams, Dr. Paul Spock, are actually able to tell what sort of diets people had. We also have researchers who work on ancient diseases as well. Dr. Ann Keenleyson has recently done some really fascinating work with the Franklin expedition, the remains that came from the Franklin expeditions, helping to identify them, helping to identify what sort of illnesses they suffered from and how they died. The other parts of archaeology, we do actually go abroad, and this is also part of the sort of the fun things about archaeology, is there's methods. How do we learn about these ancient questions? How do we learn to ask these practices? And so Trent has two different types of field schools. We have a field school that is run locally. Currently, it's being held actually in Oshawa, at the Durham campus, where we've recently purchased a historic property. So we're investigating the history, recent history, the last like 250 years of Oshawa. But we also run projects abroad. I myself run a project in Belize, Central America, where we're excavating an ancient Maya city to understand what made that city survive for almost 2,500 years through three very distinct crises. That particular population and that particular city managed to endure. How did it do it? How did it manage it for so long? Those are the sorts of questions that anthropologists ask and archaeologists ask. The other interesting thing about archaeology that I think, you're probably talking to your parents about, oh, I want to be an archaeologist. They're kind of thinking Indiana Jones, running around the world, doing things like this, and think there's not a real job in it. The truth is, archaeology is actually a business in Ontario. Anytime you see land that is being transferred from farmland into a development or housing complex or a highway goes through, it needs what's called a cultural clearance. And basically what this means is that the development company has to do due diligence to ensure that it's not going to negatively impact any cultural remains. Euro-Canadian, Indigenous cultures. And so to do this, they actually have to hire archaeologists. And there are 26 at the moment, I believe, licensed archaeological companies in Ontario. And in fact, that's one of the things that we work towards, is helping to train students who are interested in archaeology in the necessary methods. I am actually a licensed archaeologist in the province of Ontario. I hold what's known as a professional or a P license, which means that I can, and in the past, have actually engaged in what we call the industry. And so I train my students in accordance with the industry. And I still have many, many friends who run these companies. In fact, I was just in a meeting a week ago with one of them who was prepping me in terms of what their hiring needs are going to be for the next few years, because with all the development going on, there's a really big demand, believe it or not, for trained archaeologists. So we're working towards that because, of course, helping our students get an education is part of what we love doing, but also we kind of like to help you get a job when you're out of it. So I'm going to wrap up there, and I'll pass it over to my students.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Haynes. And that was a great introduction to archaeology and anthropology. And a lot of the students that are here today have maybe applied to the program, are thinking about the program, or maybe waiting for an offer back. So it's always interesting to hear what types of opportunities they have in the program. But I'll introduce our two students again. We have Sinette and Amy, both fourth-year students. And I'm going to put them on the spot for a little bit and ask them some questions. So my first question, a very, very hard question, let me tell you. I'll start with Sinette. What do you love most about your program?
Yeah, that is a tough question. I'd have to say a lot of the content is very interesting. Like it covers a wide variety of things, especially with anthropology, because of the 4 different like subclasses of anthropology. So you're able to study like a very wide variety of things and be able to find what you like the most. And I also like how in a lot of the later classes that I've taken, a bunch of them have been more like you do the readings and you go into class and it's more of like a seminar discussing the readings and bringing your own ideas in. And it's not just a lecture, but the lectures are very interesting as well as for earlier classes.
Do you have a favorite course that you maybe want to share with us that really piqued your interest?
I have 2. I can't decide between them. I took biological anthropology in my second year, and I thought it was just fascinating. It was something I hadn't really studied, and I was never good at like biology, like the science itself, but doing it like with anthropology, I found it a lot easier and entertaining.
Mhm.
And last year I took one, it was virtual worlds. So it was studied like online communities and like video game communities, which is something that I enjoy doing. So taking something about that was really cool.
Wow, it's interesting. And I like the flexibility that we have with different courses of crossing with different departments. So I actually took that biological anthropology course as well, and I still remember it. And that was a decent amount of years ago. So I enjoyed my time in that class as well. And what about you, Amy? What do you love most about your program?
It's a very hard question because I haven't found something that I didn't like about the program yet. I actually started at Trent in a psychology courses, and I ended up switching to anthropology because I enjoyed it so much. I was able to do lab work and research, as well as I was able to do one of the digs here in Oshawa, and I just fell in love with the entire atmosphere of learning about people and learning about different cultures. So it all just kind of blended together.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you mind telling us a little bit about that dig? I'm sure that we have some students wanting to know more about it because they could potentially take it if they come to Trent.
I did the dig at the Henry House, which is down at the Oshawa Lake. So we were doing the houses there. They're actually original. So we were doing the backyards essentially, and going through and actually doing the process of excavating. I truly loved it, despite the fact that my body hurt at the end. I kept coming back because I loved it so much. We actually found a couple of pieces of pottery, and I found the broken piece, and the museum had another version, which was the full piece that was donated by the family. So we had a full piece of what it looked like and what it was looking like in the archaeological record, which was very exciting. Um, and just seeing the different things that we were able to find. We found bones, we found fish bones, which hadn't been found there before. We found a whole bunch of different pieces of pottery and even a pipe, which means someone was smoking in the house. And we wouldn't have figured out that someone was smoking in the house unless we found the pipe, because it's not something you write in the letter. By the way, I'm smoking. It's not something that normally you would find.
That's so interesting. And it also might have felt so rewarding afterwards. I know you said your body ached after, but so rewarding to find something that was a piece of history and at the local museum as well. So that's so cool. And it's really interesting that some of the courses, I know that you, Sinette, as well, were talking about some of the courses that you've taken. It's nice that you can kind of relate that to what you find and apply all the theories and what you're learning to practice and getting that hands-on experience for possibly graduate school afterwards, which I have heard previous to this is what is in the books for you.
That's right. Yeah. So in September, I will now officially be going to U of T for their Masters of Museum and Masters of Information. So I'll be doing them both at the same time as a combined degree program.
Yeah.
And I don't think if I had went anywhere else besides Trent, it would have worked out just because of the experiences I've been able to have here.
Yeah. I think that's a great comment to make in the small class sizes, as it seems that Helen knows your name and Sinette's name, first names, the students, and you're not just a student number, and you get to connect with your professors as well and get to know the cool research that they do and participate in, even as an undergraduate student. Yes. So my next question, I'll put you on the spot, Sinette, and give Amy a break there. What advice do you have for a student planning to study in the anthropology program?
I would say the biggest thing is don't be afraid to speak in class. I know that seems very general, and it was something I was terrified of in first year. And I was just like, I never want to speak in class. I don't want to speak. But as soon as you start, it becomes easier, and then you can feel like you can engage more and also be able to like I guess deepen your understanding of the readings that you are doing, which are very important to keep up with because sometimes you get a lot and it gets a little overwhelming, but doing the readings is very important.
Yeah. And I remember you saying that you are doing a joint major with history. But what led you to choosing a joint major and mixing the two together? Did you know right away, or was that something that you decided after taking some courses at Trent?
I actually applied to Trent only for history. And then I took a first year anthropology course with Professor Helen Haynes, and I was just like, this is wonderful. So I think after like maybe a month in class, maybe not even, I went over and switched my major to do both because I still had a passion for history, but I'm just like, I love anthropology and they're very interconnected. You can definitely, they mesh together very well. So I figured, why not do both? Two things that I love, can't go wrong.
Yeah, that's definitely a great connection between the two, but also shows the flexibility of being able to take electives and then maybe finding a passion in something that you didn't know you had before coming to Trent at all. I did biology and then I took sociology electives and then I ended up doing a degree in both. So again, I found that passion and interest while I was here. And what about you, Amy? What advice do you have for students that are tuning in today?
Take advantage of your of the office hours. Getting to know your professors is the best part of being at Trent because it is such a small campus. You do truly get to know the people on campus, and you never know who's going to be the person that helps you. And another thing is participate. Participate in the school. Do a lot of the extracurriculars or volunteer because again it gives you experience and it's something that you wouldn't normally think about.
I love that. And again, some of the students tuning in may have not even heard about archaeology or anthropology at Trent before, and they're here. So it's really helpful to get that advice. And Dr. Haynes, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you what advice you would give to students that are maybe thinking about the programs here at Trent, or maybe would like to take it as an elective.
Well, I think Sunette and Amy touched on a couple of things that I always think about. Students have a really great opportunity in their first year to take a broad range of courses. So you take 5 courses each term, and they're introductory courses to all sorts of things. Try taking things that you might not think about, like things that are just like something you're curious about. I guess that's the best advice is university is an opportunity for you to go back to kindergarten in a way and explore the things that make you curious about the world. You know, Sunette said, you know, to talk to your professors, like take these sorts of things. It's probably one of the best opportunities you have because you're now adults and you get to choose your own courses to explore things. And you never know where your passion is going to lie. And the truth is that if you are truly passionate about something, if you find something, no matter what anybody else tells you, if you are passionate about it, you will succeed. Case in point, I'm a 5 foot tall woman who got my degree back in the 80s, and I was told that women didn't work in archaeology. We just got it for our MRSs. And now I am a professor at one of the universities. I'm an alum from the University of Toronto. Trent was always sort of one of those groundbreaking universities. I now have the opportunity to teach here. I lead archaeological projects in Central America. I have traveled to 6 of our continents. I have worked in Bolivia, China, Ontario, Mexico, with a wealth of opportunities. So don't let anybody ever tell you you can't do something. Take the opportunity to take a whole range of first-year courses and find something that inspires your passion.
That was so well said, Dr. Haynes. That was the definition, I think, of women empowerment, but also the opportunities that if you set your mind to something, you can attain it. And right now, the students are probably in grade 12 and they're kind of nervous about what's next and making those decisions. But also adding on what Sinette had said, that she had added on to her degree. She didn't know that at the beginning, but it changed. And that's okay, is that you don't have to know right away what your program is or what you'd like. You're not locked in. You can add so many things and learn from those experiences, and maybe be one day like Dr. Haynes and have all these opportunities that you can learn from and share with so many other people.
And I think Sinette made a really good point about anthropology. Anthropology complements so many other things, because anthropology covers everything that people do, everything about our culture. We complement psychology, we complement social work, we complement sociology, we complement biology, we complement environmental studies. So in fact, if you're studying anything at all that has to do with anything about people at any point in the history, at any point in the world, chances are anthropology has something to help you with.
And that was actually going to be my next question, because I did see a question in the Q&A of somebody asking about biology and how that's related, and how what areas I guess you can mix with anthropology. So can you describe a little bit of maybe other courses at Trent that are cross-listed with other programs that make it so interdisciplinary?
Well, we cross-list a lot of our biological anthropology courses with biology, our human osteology courses. We also cross-list, obviously, with forensics. Many of our cultural courses are cross-listed with Indigenous studies. Our law in ancient and contemporary societies is currently being cross-listed with the policing and community service program. Oh boy, got me there. Like, there's a whole list. There's I think at least half of our courses are probably cross-listed. We have stuff with Indigenous studies. We have all sorts of things. And I just want to point out that I'm not too sure if the students are looking at anthropology programs in Peterborough or Durham, but students can take classes across the campuses. So because I'm based in Durham, the Mesoamerican archaeology courses are based out of Durham, but that doesn't stop students from taking courses wherever. And anthropology is actually growing in Durham. We recently just acquired one of those new houses on that property that we are currently excavating. And so we are building our program there with a new anthro house with reading rooms and hopefully seminar capabilities as well.
I guess, can you just tell us maybe a brief overview of what your research area is in, and if you take on students to work with you?
Yes, actually, I take students in a couple of ways. Students can join as an undergraduate student to get a field school credit. They can return to get an advanced credit. They can also participate in post-excavation season lab work. We recently just ran an advanced human osteology 4th year course. And also, after the field season's over, there's always extra work that needs to be done, cataloging objects, helping with the analysis process. Amy actually I was able to get a work study position for her for a couple of years, including one through the summer to help me build a database of artifacts. So there's all sorts of work. My particular area of interest is dual. One is Euro-Canadian history, but my primary research focus is actually in Belize. I study resilience of societies. So I study the origin and the development and the resilience of cultures, specifically the ancient Maya. So as I said before, we're actually excavating an ancient Maya city, and we are looking at varieties of different materials. So I've had students who have done work on the human remains that we have excavated to understand the diseases, the pathologies, as well as the health and nutrition of this population through various time periods. The site starts at 800 BC. It lasts right up until 1500 AD with the arrival of the Spanish. So we also look at material culture changes. We look at architectural development changes. We look at migration patterns, because we are able to track people coming into the area through changes in culture, material cultural objects. And all of this contributes to us understanding what makes a city or what makes one of these early states successful for so long, and managing the environment I also have a senior thesis student who's working actually on looking at environmental issues right now and what sort of plants and animals people would have had access to for food and economic reasons. So it's a hugely diverse project. I have 5 master's students at the moment, 3 incoming master's students, 1 senior thesis student, and 2 undergraduate research students. So very large project, lots of opportunities.
Wow, you're making me want to go back to school so I can be part of all this. But that's amazing that, again, you're taking on all these students and, again, giving students opportunities for whatever their plans may be afterwards, which leads to my next question of what types of jobs and fields do you find students in after they graduate from either anthropology or archaeology?
Well, they can go into archaeology directly. As I said before, that's its own business. They can go into museum studies. They can also go into things where people wouldn't normally think. Human resource. There's people who are doing medical studies. I have a colleague who is actually with Sunnybrook, and she is working actually with cultural groups coming into the hospital to figure out what their needs are, how to make that approachable. So there's hospital work, there's business. I know people who engage in international business. They're called upon. I know someone who actually works for Ipos Reed with his anthropology degree, helping craft surveys that are asking people about food products. Basically, with an anthropology degree, you don't necessarily have to be like an anthropologist at a university, but anything that has to do with interacting with people is where you can go with anthropology.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I guess it's the skill sets that you learn and, again, what you're interested in. And you might be taking some courses at Trenton, find what your passion is and where that leads to. And it seems like Amy and Sinette have learned from that, and that's what they're going to be doing. And we have a couple more questions. This is a really good question, and I've answered it in the chat, but Professor Haynes, you probably see a lot of students doing joint majors in both anthropology and archaeology and doing joint majors in different areas. And I am cognizant of time, so I'm going to save this last question for all of you, all the panelists. It's a good one. Are you ever scared of coming across something spooky or coming across something that you find in a dig that you shouldn't have? And what do you do? What do you do from there?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, it depends what you consider spooky. I have to confess that I have a terror of snakes, and I know that sounds very Indiana Jones. But I've occasionally run across snakes in the excavation trenches, which is kind of spooky, and probably shouldn't be in my excavation trench. And I work with a great group of people in Belize, a great group of local men who are fabulous in the bush, and they've pulled me out of things. Yeah, cave-ins, stuff like this, spooky stuff. That's one of the great things about university and about life in general and these experiences is it teaches you resilience, and you may be amazed at what you can cope with in the world. Once you are willing to take a risk and go out there and dare. And I'm still terrified of snakes, and I still work in the rainforest. And I have had great people who tell me the rule is if it is one color, it is safe. And if it is spotted, basically back away slowly.
I am learning a lot today. But that's, again, great advice for students. And it sounds like it's never a bore, but it's also never, what's the word I'm trying to think of, but it's always exciting. Like there's always something new. You're never going to get the same outcome. You're never going to get the same object that you find in a dig. It's always interesting. It's always something new. But I am cognizant of time. So my very last question is for you, Dr. Haynes. Very easy question.
Okay.
But if students have questions about the archaeology and/or anthropology program, who is the best point of contact and what is the email address?
The best point of contact is actually the department, anthro@trenton.ca. trentu.ca. And our fabulous academic assistant will forward your inquiry to whichever professor is best suited for it. So I noticed that Ben is talking about Dr. Moore's work in Tanzania. So yes, we have people in the Mediterranean, we have people in Southeast Asia, we have people in Europe, we have people in Neanderthals, we have people in the Middle East, Mesoamerica. So if you have a question, if you direct it to anthro@trentu.ca, Ms. Pinto will forward it to the correct person. And if you don't mind, just one thing before we leave, Trent University Durham is having their research day on April 1st. So all of these students all of our undergraduate and graduate students are being encouraged to present. And so if you want to come and see what sort of research students are doing, you might want to pop by Trent University in Durham on April 1st, starting at 9:30 in the morning. And I believe we run until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a great opportunity for students to, again, if they're in grade 12, being accepted into the program, thinking about the program, to see what it's like to be as a student and ask those questions. So thank you for sharing. But I guess we've reached the end of our presentation. And I'd like to thank our panelists, Dr. Haynes, Sinette, Amy, for sharing all of your knowledge and sharing all of your experiences. I know that Sinette and Amy, just like Helen, you will be destined for great things, it sounds like, from all the experiences that you've gotten. But thank you everyone for joining us today. We do also invite you, like Helen said, to come visit our campuses. We are open 6 days a week for on-campus tours if you are interested in seeing what the campus is like. And we do also have in-person spring open houses coming up soon, so you can register today, as well as take a look at the last few ends of our sessions today on our landing page. But all of these sessions have been recorded and can be found again on the landing page within the next couple of days. But again, thank you everyone for joining us. Enjoy the rest of the weekend and take care. Hope to see you in the fall. Bye, everyone.